how to sell someone or how to enroll someone in your product or service who has a reason why they don't want to sign.
The baseline assumption is this person wants what you have. And so that's why, like, at the beginning of every sale, you're always asking what problem we solve, right? Like, why are you here? What do you want? And sometimes you have to, like, ask that question a lot of different ways to get someone to actually answer it. Because, like, if someone says, well, I just wanted to find out more, it's like, they're not actually here to find out more. They're here because they want to solve a problem. So some just saying, well, what problem are you solving? It's an easier way to get to the core of the matter. And so once they admit they have a problem, then we can,
So how you approach it then?
I'll give you the back of napkin before I give you the one that we were talking about earlier. So the back of napkin sales scripting process that I have is called Closer. And so it's an acronym, it's easy to remember. So the first thing is C is clarify why they're there, right? Why are you here, right? What brought you in today? Why'd you respond to the ad? Why'd you take time to take this call? Whatever it is, right? Clarify why they're there. You keep asking until you get the right answer. If it's just information, it's like you're not hopping on 20 calls a day taking information, right? No, of course not. Okay, what problem we solve? Cool, got that. Then L is label them with a problem, right? So that's where you're really repeating back to them. So let me just get this straight. So you're here because you're trying to lose weight and you are struggling to do so at current. Is that correct? Awesome. Okay, great. Then I think you're gonna like what we have. So then we go to O. So CLO, closer. O is overview their past experiences or past pains. So it's like, well, tell me what you've done so far to try and accomplish this. I'm assuming it's not the first person you've talked to. I'm assuming this isn't the first moment you realized you wanted to lose weight or you wanted to X, Y, Z, right? And so then we go through what I call the pain cycle, which is like, okay, what did you do?
I tried this and this.
How did that work for you? What was good about it? What was bad about it? Great, what else have you done? And you go back through, and each time it's like, and each time you affirm the person, you're like, that must have been hard. Appreciate you sharing that. Just affirming and giving them positive reinforcement throughout the conversation. And that's just building rapport 101, right? I understand how you feel. I felt the same way. My sister was like that too. I totally get where you're coming from. I know how that's difficult, blah, 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 right? O. S is then we sell the vacation. So now that we've exhausted all the pain, they're in the thick of the pain of remembering all the times they failed. You're like, you know what? Given everything you just said, I think you're gonna be perfect for what we have. Can I tell you about it? So then you get permission to sell, right? And then when you sell, I like to have 3 main points that I hit. And I think it's because people remember 3s very well. And I know you've seen Russell stuff with webinar, like 3s are remembered well. Same thing with values in a company. I think 3 people remember. It's easy to triangulate ideas, right? And so when we sell the points, a big part of this is not actually explaining the features. This is obvious, but I like giving short anecdotes that are easy to remember. So if I would say a word like, we offer accountability for whatever program it is, right? And that doesn't mean anything to anyone. So I want to give a quick story or anecdote to explain the concept. It's like, all right, well, we have 3 types of accountability. We've got peer-to-peer accountability, which is people who are going to be walking with you shoulder to shoulder. You're going to have alumni accountability, which is people who've already finished, but they're just 12 weeks or 12 months ahead of you, and they're cheering you on from the finish line. And then you have expert accountability. You have people who've helped 1,000 people just like you get to where you want to go. All right, so those are the 3 levels of accountability. If that doesn't make any sense, do you have a kid, or were you ever a child? That always gets a laugh. They're like, ha, I was a kid. You're like, well, do you remember when your parents used to tell you to brush your teeth and you don't want to brush your teeth? I want to brush my teeth, right? Like, of course, but then every night you'd still go brush your teeth even though you moaned about it. Do you brush your teeth now? They're like, yeah. Well, that's an example of external accountability turning into internal habit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be the initial parent that will tell you brush your teeth, but we're going to be able to transition to getting that internal combustion engine going by the end of this so that you're brushing your own teeth.
Right.
You can use the same thing with the seatbelt. There's a million examples you can use.
Sure.
And so that would be a quick, whatever that was, 90-second anecdote to explain point 1. And you same thing for point 2, point 3 that you have of like, it's kind of like, and then you explain a little epiphany bridge or the story of how you realized it's important. And then they would say, like, does that make sense? Yes. Boom, you move to the second point. Make sense? Yes, move to the third point. And then you go for the close. It's like, well, given X, Y, and Z, I will tell you this is extremely expensive. And the reason we say that is because it's even better than a price anchor. Because extremely expensive for everyone is expensive. If I said, hey, Louis, it's $500, just kidding, it's $100, you might have thought 500 and 100 were both cheap, right? But if I said it's really expensive, whatever I say next is going to either be actually expensive for you, in which case I braced you, which is actually more likely to close the sale, or it will be less than what you perceive as expensive. And you're like, oh, great. Because the problem that most people try and do when they sell is they try and minimize the thing they say next, but it actually has a counteractive effect. You say, it's actually not that much, it's only, right? But when you say that, when you say only, that all of a sudden people expect low and then you rip their expectations. And so it's much better to set expectations here, but people are afraid of doing that. That's not how psychology works. So you set expectations sky high, you anchor, and then when you say reality, it either matches the braced person, or it's much lower, which most cases it is. Right?
Interesting.
So, hey, it's really expensive.
Does that work for webinar sales to mass, or is that only better with one-to-one sales calls?
Haven't tested it on webinars.
Interesting. But one-to-one, yeah, let me know.
I'll let you know.
I'm curious if that also converts.
Well, I do know that from the infomercial world, you price anchor high. So it would make sense to me that, it's like, I would imagine it would still work the same way. It's like, guys, It's super expensive for guys. It's not $5,000, right? And you work your way down, right? And then when we do end up saying, hey, it's expensive, we want to make sure that we're selling to goal. And the point there is that some people sell a program, but people don't buy programs, they buy results. And so the idea is we want to, as closely as possible, sell the outcome that someone desires. And that's it. It sounds obvious, but people don't do it. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these, like, well, duh, but no one does it, right? And so, like in the weight loss example, I realized that people didn't want to buy memberships. No one's like, I want to buy a membership. Of course not. They want to lose weight. And so what we did was we shifted our selling style in the gyms and the fitness programs to how many pounds they need to lose. So we'd say, okay, cool, you need to lose 36 pounds. Based on our calculations, it's going to take 36 weeks for us to get there. And it'll take another 50% of that time to basically restabilize you, get your metabolism back up. And now you're eating the same amount at a lower weight. That sound cool? Great. And so now it's going to be a 52-week program. I will tell you, it's very expensive, but it's normally, whatever, $500 a week, but instead it's only $150 a week.
Interesting.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
And then when we get into the closing questions, I always prefer neutral or negative questions, because if I said sounds amazing, a lot of people would be like, what does sound amazing? But if I said fair enough, then it's much easier to get someone to say, well, yeah, it's fair. So it's like, how low can I make the thing that they're agreeing to? And then the negative version of that, which Chris Voss talks about in the negotiation book,
what's the difference?
Is no-based questions.
Yeah.
Or it's just like,
that's not so bad, is it? Or
right, or you wouldn't be opposed to moving forward, would you? Would it be totally crazy if we move forward today? Would it be totally crazy if we started you on Monday? Like all this, well, it's not crazy. Okay, cool, let's do it. Yeah. And then at that point, let's say Lucy says no, right, to whatever the thing we're selling. Now we begin the E of closer, which is explain away their concerns. So C, clarify, L, label, O, overview their past experiences, S, sell, which is the 3 anecdotes that you're gonna tell, and then you present the price. And then at that point, hopefully they say yes. But in the world of sales, no is the job. No is the job. They say yes, then you wouldn't be necessary, right? And so no, like selling is everything that you do before you present price. Closing is what you do after. And obstacles are what come up before you present price. That's when you disagree with the prospect. Objections are what happen after you present price, when they disagree with you.
Right. Well, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have, let me check with my spouse,
etc. And so obstacles, you wanna resolve as many of those as you can before because they become bigger, scarier monsters of objections after you present the price, right? And so, like that example I gave earlier with the information, when someone says, well, I just want to find out a little bit more information, that's an obstacle. Like someone's presenting the first 5 seconds, they're already telling you an obstacle, like you have to confront it. And so a lot of people are like, well, I think it's my metabolism slow, right? And you're like, is it though? Because there's a lot of people in Africa and none of them have stubborn body fat.
Right.
Because they're actually starving.
Right.
But so you would think that they have true starvation mode, but they look like they're starving.
Sure.
So what do you think it is? And then you can get into it. Most people are really offended by that though. But it's an extreme example. So once we get to that point, they say no, or I have to think about it. So there's 3 circles, and this took me actually a really long time to think through. 3 reasons that people upset themselves. He just kept boiling it down. And the 3 that he came up with are that people blame their circumstances, they blame other people for their unhappiness, and then they blame themselves. And so when we are confronted with an objection, underneath the pretense that the person has already admitted that they want the thing that you have, and the thing you have would solve their problem. So that has to be there. If we have that, then we have to walk through 3 concentric rings of power. And so the first thing that people do is they blame their circumstance. So they're casting their power to something else. They're saying it's because of time,
right? The money.
Or the money, right? And then, with the money, if you were selling a B2B thing, I would say, well, what's the difference between a self-made billionaire that starts at 0 and you? It's not resources, it's resourcefulness, right? Then you can tell a story if you want to reinforce the point. But at the end of the day, like if you were resourceful, you can make it. The question is, if you were to die tomorrow and you needed to come up with the amount of money for this thing, how would you do it?
You figure it out.
Exactly. So what we need to do is figure out how to tap into those resources, right? So the bubble, you go into that thing.
Right.
And so each of these has
overcoming your insecurities, your fears, people saying no, judging you, and you just taking action and risking.
And so underneath of circumstances, I have 3 big buckets, which you've got time, you've got money, and you've got what I call fit, which is actually an association with identity. So usually it might be like, well, I want to lose, I use weight loss because everybody understands it. I want to lose, I want to lose weight, but I don't want to eat broccoli. Your plan has broccoli in it. But like, you know what? I don't like cardio though. And so that's where you just go through like, you got to change the change, right? And there's a whole script around that.
Yeah.
It's like, you cannot change any of the variables, because at the end of the day, like, you know, I used to have weight loss clients who would say like, well, can we make this the breakfast? Because this is what I already eat. I'm like, well, that breakfast got you that body, so we got to change something, right? Right? Got to change, right? And so we walk through it, and I'm like, maybe you're not heavy enough. Maybe this isn't enough pain for you.
Right.
And then they're like,
why don't you put on 50 more pounds,
right,
and then you'll finally make
yeah, exactly, yeah. And then all of a sudden they're like, no. I'm like, all right, well then maybe today is the day, right? So time, money, and each of those has three. So like time has three, which I go macro, micro, when then, which is
right, yeah.
And then, you know, money, I could go through.
When then, I like that, yeah.
I would go through too many of them.
Sure.
But that's circumstances, right? The next level, and this is peeling back an onion. So if you're a salesperson or you're selling someone and they blame money or they blame time or they blame the fit of your specific program, understand that you're actually talking to someone 2 steps away from being in power.
And so making the decision.
Yes. And so if we believe ourselves as salespeople to be coaches first, because that's what we're really in serving the customer, the goal of the sale is not to get the person to buy. And this is a huge thing for most salespeople. Everyone has to understand. The goal is not to get the person to buy. The goal is to get them to decide. If you get someone to decide, then you have already given them power, more power than they've ever had in a very long time, probably. And I guarantee you that you will make more money, and you will also disassociate success in selling from purchases. You will also get more purchases. But if you do it this way, then you won't have an ego that's invested in being right, because it's not about you, it's about them, right? We get them to admit that it's never been about having enough time, because it's about priorities. We all have the same 24 hours. And you know what, if you're really busy now, do you think you're ever gonna be busy in the future? Well, yes, I do. Well, do you want it to be permanent? Well, I do want it to be permanent. Well, if you're gonna be busy in the future and you're busy today, then you might as well start now when you get the most support, because you're already busy, right? And if you learn how to do it when you're busy, you'll know how to do it again when you're busy in the future. That way you'll stick with it. Make sense? Great. Time's overdone, right? And so that's one of the 3 for time, right?
Sure.
You've drilled a lot of these. And so the next one is other people. With other people, a lot of times it's spouse often, right? And so, you know, I kind of walk through a process, which is, you know, are they aware of the fact that you're struggling with this? Yes. Do they approve of the struggle? Well, they don't, I mean, they're like, well, I mean, no, they're not approving of the struggle. So, well, then why would they be against something they already don't approve of, right? Well, and if the roles were reversed, would you be in support of them? And usually they'll say yes to that most of the time. It's like, well, then why would they be against you? And if they're anything like my wife, I would do everything I possibly could to support her, and I think she would do the same. Is that the same that you have there with your relationship? Yes or no? Cool. Finally, I'll walk through. It's like, honestly, just listen to you, you know, Tom. I think you're asking for permission when you should be asking for support. And the reality is, like, let's play this out, right? Let's play this out. Let's say that you don't do this program, whatever it is, right? Let's play it out. And 12 months from now, you're more negative situation currently, or more overweight, more poor, whatever. And if you keep doing that, who are you going to blame for? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be her? It's going to be her. So is that fair to her? Is that fair to your marriage? No. So I think what we need to be looking for is support, not permission. And so what we're going to do, tone comes up, and we're like, so what we're going to do is we're going to take control. We're going to take the power. You have to make the decision for you, and then she will support you. And what you have to do is, when you show up with her, you're like, listen, I've wanted to be an entrepreneur all my life. Who knew that there wasn't an entrepreneur school? And you go through the, you know, just like doctors go to school, but no one did it for me. And instead of being $100,000, it's only $10,000. And other people, and I'm not going to moan about how I'm not making money, because I'm actually supported with other people, and I'm committing to being more present here, to be a better wife, or be a better husband, be a better, you know, spouse to be a better mother to our kids. And you give them the script to tell the other person. And at the very end, you say, at the end of the day, sometimes, like I said, we have our 3-day no sweat guarantee. So for some reason you go home and your husband says, listen, sweetie, I don't want you to be healthy. I want you to keep the extra weight on. I want you to live 10 years shorter. I want you to pull up those sweatpants and reach your bag into those Cheetos and get them all orange and fingery and spread it over there, and teach our kids not generational health. And have, you know, early diabetes. If your husband says that to me, by all means,
we'll give you a refund.
I'll give you the refund. And usually at this point, they're cracking up, you know what I mean? And that's why rapport matters a lot with selling on the upfront, which the whole goal is there is to find some similar ground, because if you're in Paris and you find out somebody else is from the same city as you think they're amazing. If you're in the same city, you don't care at all. They're from right. So it's just like, how can we find some similarities? Because people really are persuaded more by people that they find similarities with.
Wow.
So the idea is, how can you find those? But anyways, all that to say, when you are selling, first people will confront you with time, money, or fit. And you have to be prepared to know that you might have 2 more layers you have to go through. So you might have to peel back that first layer, and then they hit you with the spouse, which is, do they approve? If the roles are reversed, and then you're asking for support, not permission, right? And then you go 3-day no sweat guarantee.
Right.
And then the last level here is self, right? And what people do here is they avoid. So what we're trying to conquer is avoidance. So now, and here's the good news, is that when someone says, I need to think about it, I'm not sure, we're talking to the decision maker. That's
Themselves,
amazing.
Yes.
You're
the decision maker.
Yeah,
yes.
this is amazing. This is great news for salespeople, because they should be like, oh my God, they're not giving me money, they're not giving me time, they're not giving me spouse. They're just saying they need to think about it. Well, what's your main concern, right? Tell me what you're thinking about. What are the variables that you're gonna use to make the decision? Let's walk out together, because at the end of the day, you don't need time to make decisions, you need information. I'm the only source of information you got. So what are your questions about? Right, and you keep going. And then from here, all we're trying to do is understanding the variables that they use to make the decision. And if they don't know them, which they usually don't, we say, do you know what it takes to make the decision about this? And then you actually physically walk them through confronting the decision. And if they're not sure about it, you're like, listen, I use this all the time. It's called the rocking chair close. It's like, let's be real. You're not gonna go and actually like sit on your rocking chair on the balcony and be like, am I gonna do this program? Of course not, right? You're gonna get in your car and your mom's gonna call you, and you got kids, and you got the laundry, and you got dinner, and you got all these other things you gotta do. And then 5 days from now, you're gonna have some moment where you either put your pants on, or you check your bank account, whatever the thing is that we're selling. And you're gonna be like, shoot, I really should have done that thing. And in that moment, you will have made the decision. So you might as well do it today. And you have all the information, you got all the momentum, because you're 6 inches from gold, right? And you don't wanna be the guy who, because like, let's think about what we've already done. I know you want to do it because you're already here, right?
Here, yeah.
You saw the ad, you put in your number, you set a time, you scheduled it, you drove in your car if it was here, or you showed up on Zoom even when you're in the middle of a work week. You did all this stuff and you spent an hour on the phone with me up to this point. You're this far. And do you think that maybe the reason that you're on this call today is because you haven't been able to pull the trigger in the past? And then usually they'll come up with something like, well, you know what, I tried a program like this before and I failed and I don't want to fail again. Which then you go into like burn you twice, which is, well, totally makes sense. And I understand, and I'm really sorry they had to go through that. Well, did you ever date anybody in middle school or high school? Well, yeah. Are you married to that person? If they are, then you can still, but it never happens. Yeah. They're like, no. I'm like, imagine if you had gone your first 6th grade boyfriend or girlfriend, and after that you swore off men or women after that one breakup. That'd be ridiculous, right? Well, it's the same thing here, because the thing is if you had a bad experience, you're gonna let that person burn you twice. First time when they were with you, and now when they're preventing you from doing the thing you really do need to do, or for preventing you from meeting the person you need to meet. Right. And so don't give that situation more power than it already had. Only let it burn you once, not twice. Right. And so then we walk through, we just have to confront the decision. And so at the end of the day, do you believe that the product is going to get you to where you want to go the way you want to get there? That's the second part that I learned later in sales, is that some people want to lose weight, but they want to lose weight their way. And I'll tell you how we learned it another time, but like we found that out because we would get people who didn't want to sign up for memberships, and we'd invite them to a free nutrition consultation, and they would spend 4 times as much money on supplements as they would on the membership.
Because they still wanted to eat, or they didn't want to train,
they lose weight. They just wanted to lose weight their way.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we need to learn is these are the yeses that we need from them. So it's like, listen, if you don't want to make a decision, I'll tell you what the variables are right now. Number 1, do you believe the product or service that we have is going to get you to where you want to go the way you want to get there? Yes. Okay. Do you want to work with me or us?
Yes or no? Yeah.
They're like, yes. Okay. Do you know someone who has, or do you have access to the amount of money to start the program? Yes, sir. If it's yes, then let's go. We just made the decision together.